Friday, March 1st, 2019, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. This morning I'm going to talk about 1914 and why I think that year marks the beginning of the end for Western civilization, for freedom and sovereignty of different nations, and how it was beginning of the ascendance of the bankers and the one world order. The police state that's becoming ever more present, and that I think JFK actually realized was kind of the plan, and I think that's why he's not here anymore, or didn't complete his job of trying to warn people about it. Anyway, it's fairly early right now. It's 7:05 a.m. London. We've got spot gold continuing lower. The price of gold, it's 1309.30, right on the lows here, down 370. Not surprising with the Europeans coming in, the big central banks, the bullion banks. Right now, they've got it in for the precious metals. The high has been 1315. And the low right here, as I said, silver 1555, down about 6, right near the lows as well. The high has been 1566. Yes, it is. I've been buying gold and silver physically since 2002. And of course, at the time, gold was $320. Silver was about $5 or $6. Thereabouts, and yes, they have gone up, but it's a very frustrating market because it's totally controlled by the central bankers, and its precious metals are a barometer for the health of the monetary system. So, and they don't want people to be involved in the precious metals, and that's why they play these shenanigans with the precious metals, of course. But one thing I think about is, would I rather have my savings with the bankers, financing shenanigans, financing wars, as I'm going to talk about later? No. So that's the way to look at it. The Dow is up 100 points, 26,020, up 0.4%. S&P 500 is up 12, also about 0.4%, just below 28,100, and the NASDAQ 100 futures up 39, or up 0.5% at 71.38. Pound or sterling is down 11 pips, 132.50. The euro is 113.65, down slightly, 5 pips. So not much movement there in those currencies. And the dollar is up 0.33% against the yen, 111.80. The dollar is up marginally against the yuan, Chinese yuan, at 670.62. Crude oil continues to go higher. WTI 57.85, so up almost 1%. And Brent 67 exactly, up 1% as well. The bond market dropped a little bit yesterday, so yields popped up. We're back above 270, in the 10-year yield is at 272. The 1 year is 255, and the 5 year is 252. So the curve is only inverted by 3 basis points. I think there was the preliminary number for fourth quarter GDP in the US, and that came out as expected, and apparently that was seen as a good sign. I think it was like 2.6%. For the GDP data, there's an advanced number that came out, I don't know, earlier this year. Then there's the preliminary number, and there's a final number that will still come out. So that's why we've seen this kind of move in the bond market. In spite of the pretty good, the supposedly good GDP number and the bond market going down, the stock market went down yesterday as well. The Dow was down about 69. The NASDAQ was down about 22. So the markets were down over 0.25%, which is unusual. So 1914, why do I think it's such a pivotal and important year? Well, it was the year that changed everything, in my opinion, not only for Europe, but for the United States. For Europe, it was the start of World War One. In the beginning, it was unexpected. It was people thought the war was going to be over before Christmas. That was the saying. And for Americans, 1914 was the year the Federal Reserve System started operating, the year the bankers took control of the country through a central bank. There's an old saying, of course, by Meyer Amschel Rothschild, give me control of the money supply and I care not who makes the laws. So that's what it's all about. So how do I know the bankers were involved? Well, you need to read a few books. Like I recommend A Creature from Jekyll Island by G. Edward Griffin, where he goes through exactly what happened prior to the creation of the Federal Reserve. Highly recommend that book. And with World War I in Europe, the war didn't stop. It was not finished at Christmas. The war got bigger. It got expensive, so all the major countries of Europe suspended the gold standard, or they suspended redeemability of money, because basically that's what it does. People take in their banknotes, they want their money, their gold, and they're not given their gold. They're saying because of war, emergency, we're gonna just have to use that paper. You can't have your money anymore. So that's the beginning of the end for the gold standard. Some countries try to get back on it after the war, but look at where we're now. And then in the US, the same thing. It was the beginning of the end for sound money in America. By 1933, Americans went off the gold standard domestically. FDR, who was a banker, who was, people think he was a great man, but he confiscated actually Americans' money with the Gold Confiscation Act. And what did he use that money for? Well, for government spending, for preparing for World War II, I would say, and more wars. And it's been, and these world wars as well, World War I, World War II, they've all been used to, as a psychological operation to convince people or nations that they can't be trusted to live freely with each other and respect each other, that there has to be a global or world policeman looking after all these different nations, that we're not good enough peoples to run our own lives. And I think that's what it's all about. And why is money so important? Well, as Ron Paul says, half of every commercial transaction that we do in our lives, half of all of these transactions, we have to use money, as there is no barter anymore. So if you control the money, you control a lot. And if you control the money and then you control the people through the police state, you control everything. And that's why people like Howard Buffett, Warren Buffett's dad, said that you cannot have freedom without gold redeemable monetary system. And he wrote that in 1948. That's why Alan Greenspan, despite the fact he became a central banker, said in 1966 that only gold can protect you from confiscation by inflation, by governments and central banks, and that gold and economic freedom are inseparable, and that gold is the enemy of the statist. And because gold is like an anchor. It doesn't allow statists or socialists or warmongers or fascists all the people we have now in politics to spend money that they don't have and create a national debt to lumber the public with. So basically, it was the really the beginning of a slave fiat money debt-based system in 1914, and we're still in it. What's the way to get out of it? Well, sometimes I wonder if in the world in general and people in general are awake enough to realize this, but on a personal basis, there is a way. It's not to buy into the mindset of the present system, is try to stay outside of it as much as possible. And that's what I try to do in my videos with my ideas. And they might sound, how can I say, well, they are supposed to be contrarian, but sometimes it's lonely. But you need to think of, I personally think of, do I really want to play this corrupt game? And do I really think that a few bankers and bureaucrats are better than billions of other people? No, that's the way to think, in my opinion. And that's why to protect yourself, not only monetarily, but also spiritually, you need to find this out yourself. You know, I'm not going to be, you know, I'm just trying to give you my opinion, and you have to look at it, into it yourself. So there you go, 1914. So 115 years later, you know, the bankers, the David Rockefellers of the world, I know he passed away a year or two ago, but they're closer and closer to their end goal, which is running the world from Basel, Switzerland at the BIS, from Liberty Street or the Mariner Eccles building or Threadneedle Street, or from Frankfurt. They're ever closer. And that's only, the people are to blame for buying into all the scaremongering, all the wars, all the schemes for social welfare, saying that government has to look after you. And that's what it's all about. They've convinced the general public that they need better people to look after themselves. So that's the lesson of 1914. You need, you know, there's, you know, your enemy, you know, you've got an enemy in other nations, and you've got an enemy in economics. Government needs to look after you. And I think that's what JFK exposed with his speech on secret societies. And that's why he was taken out, unfortunately. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Make sure you also hit the little notification bell to make sure you're notified of my videos. A lot of my subscribers tell me that sometimes they are not notified. And you can also follow me on Twitter, Steemit, and DTube. I wish you all a great day. Take care. Bye.